excited to be here today. It's interesting. So Pastor Emmett texted me in maybe April or May and said, "Hey, we're doing a series, later in July and in the summer, and love you come say a few words." And I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to do it." Right. So we talked. He told me what the idea would be and what he'd like for me to share. And so this week I was texting him and I said, "Hey, so what are you thinking? I'm coming to share. What are you thinking? A minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?" Why don't we just go with 30 minutes and then a 15-minute Q&A? I'm ready to go. Now, I will tell you, I did do some notes, because if it was 5 minutes, I wouldn't have had notes. And I can talk for an hour, unfortunately. But I have some notes to keep myself kind of guided here. But since I'm not a pastor, I'm not a preacher, I'm not trained in that, I hope you'll forgive any wanderings that I might do. But like a good millennial, the first thing I did when he said 30 minutes is I went on YouTube and I was like, keys for preaching a sermon. What do pastors do when they have to speak for 30 minutes? So I got a couple of tips there, but not a professional speaker. But again, yes, I've been in the Brookwood cluster. This will be my 6th year here. I spent 6 years as an assistant principal before that at Crickland Middle School over near Collins Hill. I also was an assistant principal at an elementary school, which I can tell you, going from a high school AP biology teacher teaching seniors to having 5-year-olds wiping their nose on my dry clean shirt here every day was quite a change. But before that, I taught high school biology for 8 years at Collins Hill High School. And actually, it's funny you did that. That's something we did in our genetics unit. So supposedly that's genetically controlled, whether you go left over right or right over left. And I remember there was one year that I was teaching a gifted 9th grade class, and we did this, and it's more for fun than anything, right? Just seeing the differences that we have. But I remember one kid coming up and saying, I bet that if people with different clasps try to hold hands, I bet it won't work. I bet they're not compatible. So then we've got all these little, because he's like, I once had this little girlfriend, and I was trying to hold her hand, and she kept trying to change it up on me. And I bet it was because of that. So we might have stumbled upon something, I don't know. But that definitely hit home, and it was a great welcome. So Tim asked me to talk about what gives me hope, and just share about some things that go on in the school system and in our cluster of schools, which I feel very lucky to be leading and to be a part of. But what gives me hope? And so the first thing I was like, well, let me just figure out what exactly the definition of hope is. So ChatGPT told me that hope is a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. Or as a verb, it's to want something to happen or want something to be the case. And, I have a lot of hope. There are a lot of things that I want for our children, for our staff, for our community here. And not being a preacher, I won't preach about it, but I think just in my experience, I've learned that if my hope is in anything other than God, then I'm going to be disappointed. So there are a lot of things that I want to hope in, but I know that when I wander there and I put all of my hope into people or into a politician or a government or even a neighbor or friend, that I'm often disappointed. So just from where I come from, I think that is something that's very lovely to me. And so as I thought more about hope, I thought, when is it that we really need to dive into hope, or when do we need hope? And it's pretty obvious. We don't need hope when things seem to be going well, right? If we're trying to get to some desired outcome, when things are going well, it's like, yeah, let's just keep that going. I don't have to have this high level of hope, right? Usually we think about having hope when we feel like, oh, we're in some despair, or times are challenging, or in my position, when I have to make really difficult decisions, I have to have hope that I'm doing the right thing, and I have to have data to inform that I'm going to get to that certain thing that is best for all, or certainly best for most. And in my job, most days are challenging. A lot of times if you come into school, it seems like a pretty happy place. And if you've been into Brookwood High School, and if you haven't lately, you're always welcome. Come on up. We'd love to have you and show you around. But most days are challenging. It's interesting, though, in what we kind of the era that we live right now, talking about the difference between the 50s and now. I think today more negative things get publicized than positive things. That's a fact, right? If it bleeds, it reads. That's what if you're a journalism major, you've probably heard that. right? So if it's a shock value, it'll make it onto the news. You know, if we've got accomplishments that have never been done in Gwinnett County or certainly at Brookwood, it doesn't necessarily make it into the newspaper, right? Yeah, we know that. But it sells when it's more salacious and it's more, inflammatory. And I will tell you, in my experience, and I've been in education, this is my 20th year, and in my 20th year, my premise is that the education system that we have, and again, I can't speak for the whole state or the nation, I really can't even speak for all of Gwinnett County, but I can definitely talk for the Brookwood cluster, that we have more opportunity for our students. We have way better trained staff. The staff, what they get right now in our schools is so much better than anything I got 20 years ago when I began. The vision and the coherence that we have and the opportunities that the kids have when they come to our school are better than they've ever been. There's more opportunity, there's more connection to things that will actually translate, into careers and into their college success. We got kids that graduate here and hardly have to step foot on a college campus. And they're almost ready to graduate college. They can get so many credits and they can get so many things that prepare them for the future. But with that greatness that I would argue, and I can talk about it all day, there's some challenges that come with that. In order to be, I wrote down, in order to have those kinds of opportunities for real learning, it requires access to a lot more. And it requires access to a lot more information. I mean, you think about what a kid that walks into Brookwood High School in 9th grade, what they have on their cell phone, for good and bad. Right? I mean, think about for the good. I remember, I do want to give a quick shout out. My parents actually were in town this weekend. My mom, Kendra, my dad, Scott, came and joined us today. But I remember being in 8th and 9th grade and having to do a research project. And where did I get my information? Thank goodness we had an encyclopedia. As a matter of fact, I remember the process of buying an encyclopedia. So we had a grocery store right by us called the Bilo, right? And Bilo would sell encyclopedias, but we would buy like one, I think about every 2 or 3 weeks they would come out with the next letter or the next segment, right? So, and like if you would miss one, you'd have to wait for it to circle back. So we didn't have like O and P for a while there. And, but that was it. That was the limit. So whoever wrote that encyclopedia, that was the truth to me, right? And that was the truth for whatever I was turning in that day to my project. You think about a kid today, not only can they access millions of different sources of information, but you can actually get it summarized for you with AI, right? And you can so the access is terrific. The ability to learn something and to see something, how it really occurs in the world, in nature, if you're a science teacher or whatever, the ability to do that is better than it's ever been. But it also puts everything right at your fingertips, right? I see people who've had kids in the household lately, they're not, and they're like, oh yeah, so I've got 3 daughters, 2 in middle school, 1 in high school, and it's like whack-a-mole trying to figure out how to keep them safe, right? How to keep them, focused on the right things. And, we do the best we can, but really that access is out there. One of the big challenges is even if I do everything I can to keep my kids focused on the right things, there's always going to be some kids that don't have those supports, right? And so that information leaches, sometimes slowly, sometimes very quickly, right? And so I think when we think about schools and we think about the way that news about things travel, there tends to be an overall negative feel for how things are going in schools. And if you come spend a couple of days with me, I'm pretty much sure you won't think that. You would see the great things. So I want to talk a little bit about just some of those challenges, but then some of the great things that are going on and why I have great hope, not only for this next generation coming up, but more specifically for our community here. All right, so we do face challenges. When I was growing up, I went to Irmo High School, right outside of Columbia, South Carolina, and we were much smaller. We had about 1,800 students, at our school. Brookwood this year, we'll probably have a little over 3,800 students. So we'll be the biggest high school in the state, I think, for the 3rd straight year now. Actually, the next biggest in the state is Grayson, where there'll be about 3,300. So this is a popular place to live. But one of the challenges is as information gets shared, you guys know, all the different apps, whether it's Instagram or Snapchat, or there's millions of them, there's some that I don't even know, I'm sure, is that when something happens, one of the most popular things to do now is to get a video of it and get more likes. likes. The more likes you get, the more popular you are. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's a dog running across the commons area at school or if it's two kids getting a fight outside the bus lane. And so, I remember growing up, kids got in fights in the bus lane all the time. Not all the time, but it happened, right? I remember a couple of them where somebody got caught up in the fence. It was a bad fight, right? But it ended right there. Now it doesn't end right there, right? And you think even if you're that student that got in the fight before it was over, you probably got a consequence at school, but then you moved on. Now you think about a kid can't move on because it's online forever. And people come back, and that's my favorite part or my least favorite part of all of it, whether it's the news or whether it's a social media app, is the comments section. Right? You want to see something bad about me? Go on, somebody start posting something on our community website about what the school's doing, and I'll be on there somewhere, right? Yeah, be careful what you read sometimes, right? And then kids will get on there, and maybe they make a mistake, right? And then bam, 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 and it'll keep going. It's hard for kids to move past it. And think about when you were growing up, just the peer pressure. You had a couple of friends that maybe your circle you got peer pressure from. Now you get peer pressure from the whole world, potentially. And if you get embarrassed online, you just think about not what your mature brain thinks like, but a 14-year-old's brain. A 14-year-old boy. I was a 14-year-old boy, and I was dumb. I did dumb things. I did silly things, right? But that didn't stay with me forever, right? So kids are having these huge challenges. And someone told me, hey, I hear there's a fight at Brookwood like every day. Absolutely not. I probably would have quit if that was the case. I couldn't handle it, right? But what happens is even if something happens at another school in Texas, like it did this year, and somebody said, hey, this was Brookwood High School, according to everybody else, that's Brookwood High School. Wasn't it Brookwood High School? But everything that happens gets magnified. And when somebody makes 100 on the test or gets a 5 on an AP exam, we don't post that on Snapchat, right? So we have challenges, and we do, and I won't hide from them. We've got students that have made bad mistakes, but we've also got some of the best students in the state of Georgia. And that's kind of what I want to talk about here. I promise, tell me if I'm starting to go over. I want to talk about that idea. So last year we had around 3,950 students at Brooklyn, and we had about 42 students who did something, had some discipline issue where we said, nope, you don't get to stay here, and you get to go to the alternative school, right? So it's right at 1.05%. 1% of our students made serious mistakes. Now, did some of the other students skip a class here and there? They love to skip their advisement class and have 2 lunches. I can't figure out why they do that. But we're working on it, right? But they did other things. Some students did some disrespectful things, and this and that, the minor things that every school has dealt with since the beginning of time. But only 1% of our students really did anything that was that worthy that, hey, this is not the place for you. And what I love about Brookwood is we've got a staff that is extremely caring, extremely inclusive, and extremely loving. And we do whatever we can to bring our students in. But there's sometimes where that's not enough support. And we're willing to make those hard decisions and say, this isn't the place for you. Maybe it will be one day, but it isn't right now. And so that happened with 42 students last year. So again, 1%. And so, there's a lot of things, challenge-wise, it's like, well, how does the school fix this? Well, one of the questions I ask myself every day is, what is the role of the school, right? I used to think it was to educate students in math, science, reading, writing, arithmetic, right? But it seems to be a lot more than that. And we know that when it is a lot more than that, it's actually better. And so I wanted to tell you that while we do have about 1% that have needed that extra structure and that extra level of consequence and things like that, I wanted to tell you some of the good things that 99% of our students accomplished this year. And so, like Tim's daughter, she just graduated a couple months ago. She's a part of some of these statistics. So we had over 930 graduates this year. It actually went up. So when we printed this in the early May, we actually had 2 that ended up making it across the finish line that we weren't as optimistic about. Maybe we should be more optimistic in the future. But one of my favorite parts of this is that we had 408 honor graduates. That means to be an honor graduate, yeah. So that, I believe, as far as I saw in statistics, we are the biggest school, but that's the most honor graduates of anybody in Gwinnett County, and so I would assume the state of Georgia. But to be an honor graduate, you have to have a 90.0, not an 89.9, a 90.0 GPA in all your classes in all of high school. So you averaged an A. That's almost half of our students averaged an A for the entirety of their high school. Now, some schools, that might not mean a lot. I'm going to tell you right now, our teachers at Brookwood are loving and they love your kids, but they will not give you something for free. When you come to Brookwood, you earn it. One of the statistics that I am most proud of, and I don't have it for the senior class that just graduated because they're about to start college, but with last year's class, us and North Gwinnett High School tied for the lowest percentage of students that had to take a remedial class when they went to college. And what that means is that when you get a diploma, when you get an A from Brookwood, it means something. You have learned it. You didn't just get an A. We didn't give you something. You earned it, and you're ready to move on. It's not you got an A, and then you had to go redo something in college. It's one of the things I'm most proud of. So we had the lowest in all of Gwinnett County. This is another one. So AP courses, if you're not familiar, those are college-level classes. If you score high enough on the final exam at the end, that's a College Board national course. You can get college credit, depending on where you go. So we encourage our students to do that because we're trying to prepare them for those next steps. We're not just saying, oh, let's lower the bar and trip across the finish line, right? So we had this year, our graduating class, the class that just graduated, I got the data last week, 71.5% of our seniors took at least one AP or dual enrollment class. Y'all, we have gone up almost 15% in the last 3 years in that area. That means that kids are prepared. They're going in ahead of their peers when they go to UGA, when they go to North Georgia and Georgia Tech and Kennesaw and Georgia Southern and all over the United States. They're prepared. These are that 99 that are doing those right things. And I hope you'll take a second when you get there. I won't go through all of these. We had 177 kids with a GPA of 4.0 or higher. How do you get higher? Isn't an A 4 points, right? Those AP courses are so difficult. And I used to teach AP biology. It was about a year and a half worth of normal high school curriculum shoved into 9 months, right? So we had 177 kids get over that. An AP class, you get a little bit more than a 4 for getting that. That's tremendous. That's basically never making a B. 177. It's over 20%. Like you go in a classroom, 1, 2, 3, 1 out of every 5 kids never made a B the whole time there. Impressive, right? Unbelievable. So not only Hope Scholarship, and now you know Hope Scholarship is a B average, 3.0, right? But we had over and above Hope, we had $22.2 million in scholarship awarded to our seniors. We had a couple of really prestigious, we had a military academy appointment. That's extremely difficult for those of you that know. We had 3 offers at MIT. Actually, only 2 accepted, believe it or not. Somebody said, no, I'd rather not. I've never been in that place. But 9 Ivy League offers. We had 1 Posse scholarship. This is one of the extremely exclusive scholarship that will pay for that student's study abroad and all of their college. A Quest Bridge Scholar, if you've never heard of that, take a look at that. That student will not only have the opportunity to have all their college paid for, but college as long as they want to go. Whether that's a master's degree, whether that's a doctorate degree, whatever that is. So you can see there's only a couple dozen of those in the United States each year. So we've got students that are not only the highest in Gwinnett, they're the highest in the state. They're among the best in the nation. We had 6 National Merit finalists this year. There were only 3 schools with any in Gwinnett. Math and Science School, North Gwinnett, and us. And we had 6 in there. That's the 99% that are doing those right things. Those are the great things. I mean, we've also got, if you think about our athletic program, we won 6 state titles this year. We set state records, like blew the doors off at girls swimming, some of the best that there's ever been in the state of Georgia, but 6 total state championships. If you've ever had kids in our marching band or our theater program, some of the very best in the state. Matter of fact, if you ever just want to support a teacher, those are the kinds that other schools come and recruit all the time. So I am constantly, and I don't really get to negotiate salary, so I got to do every other thing to try to keep people happy, right? So if you ever want to just be nice to somebody, be nice to our band director and our theater, and really all of our teachers, but they got recruiters coming out for them. But again, this is the 99 of what our school looks like. Now these are the things that you'll never see this graphic on WSB News, right? It doesn't hit, right? And people, oh, okay, yeah, move on. We don't have a kid at Brookwood, we don't care about this, they scroll by it, right? But, oh, there was a horrible fight here, or this and that happened, that makes the news really quick. And so what gives me hope are the things that the 99 are doing. And our staff, so we've got about 300 employees at Brookwood High School, about 210 teachers and 90 other staff and support there. And every year, once you've been at a school in Gwinnett County for 3 years, you're able to participate in what's called the transfer process. So you could choose and say, I'm at Brookwood, I'd like to move to this school, or I'd like to move to this school. And you get to go before the rest of the public or teachers from other districts. You get to go interview for those jobs. It's a good process. So every year, every teacher, all 210, have the ability to go in there and click the button and say, yep, I'm going to transfer. So this year, when teachers did that and they got to choose the schools they were interested in, we had 227 teachers push the transfer button for us, saying they wanted to come to Brookwood. We had one teacher leave. One. And it's not fair because that school only works 4 days a week and it doesn't work on Friday. And keep losing people every day. So outside of that one, nobody left. So So what I love, and this is not because of me, it's because of our community, it's because of our schools, it's because of our families, it's the support we have here. What I love is when somebody interviews for a job, I call their old principal, or if they're brand new, I try to bring some new blood in now and then, mix it up a little bit. I call their professor, and I'll say, was this one of the best teachers in your building last year? And if they hesitate, I'm like, oh, thank you. No more. If they're not, I don't even have to interview them. It's terrific. And I'm lucky. Not all schools have it that way. But truly, that is because of our community. That is because of the Brookwood cluster of schools. And that gives me a lot of hope. And, I remember growing up, I went to church growing up, and I did Sunday school and everything. And I remember hearing a story about sheep in a field, and how 99 of them were good, and one of them ran off and got lost. Right? We've probably all been the one, sometime wandering along, right? And some of them go off into another district, another state, another field, and all that. Some of them are just right outside the gate, right? But when I think about our schools, and I think about what gives me hope, is, yes, what the 99 are doing is unbelievable. And I hope that you have some confidence in seeing what our best and brightest are doing in this community. But I also know that in there, and I'm paraphrasing, that there's just as much joy or more joy when the shepherd leaves and finds the one that is lost. And I can tell you story after story about kids who have made big mistakes, who have come back and are now doing terrific things and have turned it around. And if I could leave you with anything, it's really that we should have hope in our schools. I think our schools are one of the beacons of hope. Now, we feel everything in culture. Like, this is going to be a heck of a fall, right? So when there's political turmoil, we get it, because nobody wants to agree on anything. And so when parents interact with me and kids, nobody agrees on anything, right? So it's going to be interesting, right? We get that feel. But I do know that even though we do have 1% that struggle, not only do I have solid hope for this, but I have that hope of what I want to be for that 1% as well that get lost. And the staff and teachers at Brookwood High School love the kids. They love teaching. They're highly trained. They're excellent. They're much better teachers, most of them, than I ever was. But they love our kids, and they'll do anything they can to help them be successful. So, I know that God celebrates when He found us, found the one, when we were that one that were lost. We do the same thing. We hold accountable. We give consequences. We make sure that those on the wrong track, we do something about it. But we care, we don't give up. But we have that 99 that we also celebrate that are terrific. And so from our schools, I wanted to sincerely thank you all. Thank you all for the continual support. Thank you all for coming to football games and coming to plays, even when your kid doesn't go here anymore. Like, I meet more people that, oh, my kid graduated 15 years ago. And but that level of support is what makes our cluster different. It's what makes leaders in our cluster of schools and our 7 schools be able to do the things to really help support not only the super high achieving 99%, but also go after that 1%, just as God came after us, and help them get on track. So, very grateful for you guys. Pastor Emmett also asked me to open it up for any questions or any thoughts or anything. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
I know there's been a lot of talk recently about banning cell phones during the school day. I mean, we do have friends who are teachers, and they do say that cell phones can be a problem during the day. What is your stance on that?
So, cell phones are messy because a lot of things are messy, but cell phones are tough because everybody's got them, and for a good part of the day, it's actually fine. Like in our commons during lunch, I mean, kids are doing work on them. A lot of them are watching social media or whatever, but when they don't have that, then they're standing up and being busy. So I kind of like them, like watching their little shows sometimes. But yeah, in the class, in the commentary. In class, it is tough. So what we don't have a district stance right now. Part of the challenge is I could put something in tomorrow that says, every kid, turn in your phone on your teacher's desk and be in class, come get it at the end. One of the hard things is when one of those magically disappears, who's responsible for it, and who pays for it, and who, right? Like, it's tough, right? So that is one thing. So I have asked. I actually had a lunch with our deputy superintendent the other day, and I told her, I said, we need to start piloting something. We need some guidance around this because we have to have consistency. Now, in my experience, the teachers who have the best classroom management don't have problems with cell phones. And this is true for pretty much anything in class. Again, remember, 99%, 1%, especially at Brookwood. When you come in and you have a procedure and you follow up on it, say, hey guys, here's what we're going to do. When we start, when I say, hey, bell ringer's going, whatever the beginning of class is every day, when I have a routine and a ritual, when I have a structure, and they know, and then I see it out, I say, hey, you're going to put that away. Now, if you don't, we can handle it, but you go in some teachers' classrooms, you don't ever see a cell phone. You come in some, and they're up like this. And those are conversations that we have with teachers. So, yes, I think we should put them away. When we got rid of the wireless in the schools for the students, I probably had 500 fire-angry mamas and students, but telling me they couldn't get a hold of their kid, what's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. So it is tough. I don't necessarily think we can just take them away, but I think we do need to have some processes. So we're working on it, and we have a school improvement team where I have teachers from each department. We meet monthly, and they say, hey, here's what's going on, here's what's working, here's what's not working, and we come up with solutions. So we're going to try something, but I have asked that we have more of a district guidance on that for what we do, you know what I mean? Because really, the school, I can't be buying new $1,000 cell phones every time one is, taken, or somebody says that the teacher lost it, right? So, but yeah, no, I absolutely, when a teacher tells a kid to put it away, they don't put it away, they stay on it, they get consequences, we follow up with it. So, yeah, yes, ma'am.
I read this teacher put out that she warns them once, and then if they don't, she puts it in a brown paper lunch bag, folds it over, staples it, and lays it on the desk. So they still have possession of it, but they can't.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. So when we were at Cruise, we had purple pouches. If you've had a kid come through here, your kid probably got the phone pouched at least once. And what happened is I said, oh, Jim, you got your phone out, let me put that in your pouch. Bam. You put it out. The only way you get it out is we have a little database. You put Tim's name in there, you put Brett's name in there, and at the end of the day, your last period teacher would cut it open, and then they would mark your name off the database. So if your name didn't get marked off the database, you got a consequence. And it worked pretty well. And the teachers that followed it, it worked really well. Challenges, at Cruise we had 1,200 kids. We have 3,900. And so everything is a problem of scale for us. And, I've got 10 assistant principals, and I'll argue they're 10 of the best in the district. But if they did that all day, not only would they quit, but they would, we just couldn't do it. So those are the kind of ideas, though, that we're looking at. Like, how do we do this? How do we not have all this liability, but also have the focus. I'll tell you, and I've worked at a lot of different schools, and I've worked at all three levels. The kids at Brookwood are great. When I get on the announcements every Friday, or typically about every Friday, and I just do it whatever. But sometimes I get on there in the middle, and they're like, "Oh, it's Tuesday. Why is he on there?" Right? Something happened. Like for example, our hat wearing was getting a little out of control there, right? So our dress code, and we don't like harp on dress code to the max, right? But we have to be able to. We have cameras. We have to be able to identify. Because believe it or not, we've had some kids from another school just show up and come over and have lunch with their little girlfriend. So one of the things is we have to be able to identify them. So we have no hats or head coverings. And the problem is unless it's religious in nature, we can't let you have anything because then can I wear my hat backwards? Then can I do this? And you get into this, it's horrible, right? It's impossible. So we just say no hat. So one day I just had to get on there and said, look, y'all, teacher asked you to take it off and you don't do it. And it's the same as me asking you, you're not doing it. You get consequences, I need you to move forward. I'll tell you, the next day, 95% of it was gone. So our kids are great. Like most of them will really do what you ask. They just, if you don't give them a concrete stop, they're going to wave right on through it, right? So if you don't tell them what the expectation is, they're going to come up with their own. So we have to do that. And so sometimes, and maybe with cell phones, 90% of it will be that, because that is going to be a focus this year, is trying to limit that. But yeah, so it's going to be quite a layered decision as we go. Yeah, no question?
So as you mentioned, the world is changing from one where for most of the lifetime of public education, facts have been scarce and hard to find. And it seems to me that much of education was devoted towards teaching people these scarce facts. And we're entering now a time when facts are relatively cheap, but discernment is scarce. What changes are you seeing now in the curriculum to adjust to this changing need?
Yes, that's absolutely right. I mean, you can get every bit of information you want. You can ask AI, and it will give you an aggregate of everything out there. That doesn't mean that everything out there is fact, right? And so that discernment is a challenge. And I think we've seen that, I mean, at the state and county level, like our standards have changed significantly. I know as a science teacher, it's no longer about, like when was the last time you talked about the 5 stages of mitosis? You probably didn't, right? You probably made an A when you took the test. You didn't go to that sense, right? It's actually 4 stages. I'm even wrong. But if you needed it, you Google it right now and get it, right? But one of the challenges that we do, and this is a part of, and it's particularly a part of our social studies and language arts classes. Math is still pretty fact-based, right? But in our social studies and language arts classes, the compare and contrast, the evaluating sources, that's actually in our standards now. Evaluate sources for their validity and for their contribution to X, Y, Z, right? And so part of the challenge is we've got kids and families that have, because it's not, like you said, it's not just facts, it's, hey, what do I believe about these facts, or how do I feel about them, or how do they impact me? So we got some people that feel all the way here, and then everywhere in the middle, right? And so I don't think our job is to tell people what they should believe or what they should, how they should interpret things, but the ability to look at it and recognize that just because the internet says it doesn't mean it's true, right? And so that is a thing that we do in our curriculum, and particularly in language arts classes as they compare texts and as they look from different lenses and different perspectives. Because a lot of times the things we learn, especially in history, you're like, oh, that was a fact. Yes, that did happen, but how did that affect this group? How did that affect this person? How did the president see that? How did that affect business owners at that time? And so we've shifted a lot of ours from just, Magna Carta was signed and blah, blah, blah. We don't need to know dates anymore. Those aren't really our standards as much. We still need to know some, especially in your sciences and math, but a lot of it is how do you interpret sources and material authors. So that is something, it's a big push. It's been probably for about 5 or 6 years when our language arts standards changed. We had a significant shift into that. So our teachers have as well. So, yes.
Not a question, but a comment. You have absolutely blown my mind. These statistics are incredible. I know you don't get all the credit for it. In the 2 years, Bo and his predecessor get a lot of the credit, but you certainly get a lot of the credit for maintaining that level of excellence And the statistics are unbelievably incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I talked to Bo the other day. He's doing great. He's in East Tennessee with his dad. His dad's sick right now, and so he's an assistant principal up there now, but doing great. I know he wants to come back one day. But he's doing great, and I actually just talked to Miss Dees, Debbie Dees, the other day, the principal before was forward. So she's doing terrific. She's actually retired. I was actually trying to convince her to come back part-time and be an AP, really be my advisor. The other day, so, but thank you, we appreciate it, and really it is, I mean, I didn't raise these kids, but we do, and it is one of the biggest challenges. Sometimes I found, in my experience, sometimes it's easier to go from, oh, this isn't going well, to get it going better. To go from good to great or to maintain is hard, and it stresses me out. That's what keeps me up at night. And, you know, at Brookwood, of course, our motto has always been a tradition of excellence. So what we've been doing, starting last year for our vision, is trying to define what excellence is. And so we define excellence, or we strive to have excellence in instruction, excellence in collaboration, and excellence in relationships. And so last year we reset what is our framework here for instruction at Brookwood High School. So we learned through it, we had staff development. I mean, we got some of the best teachers in the state, so they were leading some of it. And so really that focus on instruction. This year, our goal is to have effective and efficient collaboration on all our teams. So my goal is that when you send your kid to Brookwood, you say, oh, did I get a good algebra teacher? My goal is that it doesn't matter where you go, I can just throw your kid anywhere and they'll land in a great classroom. And so trying to create that continuity where if you've got something terrific going on in your classroom, that I can steal that, I can borrow it, I can adapt it, and we can all, you know, raise our level. And we always have that focus on relationships, whether it's students or whether it's with each other, with colleagues, to have that family. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was wondering if the nowadays free speech is not free. And I remember during the Vietnam War era having very fiery arguments with my veteran father and uncles. Mm-hmm. But you were able to express that opinion. Nowadays you get canceled. So my question was, does Brookwood High School talk about free speech, talk about cancel culture, talk about the idea of saying something that is not popular, but is supportable in a free democracy?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I tell kids, I actually did an announcement about this last year, advisement lesson for the students. We all have freedom of speech, but we can't confuse that and think that our speech is then free from consequence, right? So I don't know that we necessarily teach cancel culture or whatever, but that's clearly out there. I mean, students are afraid of saying the wrong thing on video or this or that. And so
are they free to say something in class?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Are they told that they can say something in class, even if it's unpopular, if it's not concordant with the culture?
Yeah,
they have that freedom.
I've seen. Oh yeah, and some of them go all the way all around the world with that. So I will tell you, particularly in our AP Language Arts classes, those kids can debate. They should be running our government, not our government some days. Like those kids have strength, and maybe not. They're 17, but no, they absolutely can. I see that more than that. And I'll be honest, like on a regular grade level class, the kids kind of learn and they do it and they work hard. I don't see as much discourse, but the kids that are at that engaged level, the kids taking those college classes, they are into it. They read. I see some healthy debates, and but yeah, they're more than free to do that. Now they got to be careful if they start doing things that disparage other people. They can have consequences what they like, and they can't talk however they want the teachers. Like I'm not gonna put up with that, right? But yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you probably don't see it ever in math class necessarily, but particularly in language arts, social studies classes, you see that. A lot in our government classes. Yeah, in the back.
I just wanted to provide praise in a different area and shine some light on Brookwood. I come from a special ed background, and I'll just say that success, accolades, progress looks different for different people. And so while the kids I work with typically don't fall into this category, I would say Brookwood has done a beautiful job, including the special ed children, creating space for them at their prom. The teachers that are committed, like usually a general ed science teacher is not going to volunteer to chaperone the special ed severe and profound class at the prom. Yeah. So those teachers have to show up for everything. Yeah. And I just think that that's an area that has just been in addition to, from another standpoint, behavior, taking 60 kids to New York and bringing 60 home and having zero issues, zero.
It was a lot. I was there. I remember, yeah. I mean, when they said, all right, now that group, y'all are gonna walk over there, I was like, we're in Manhattan, we're gonna do this, so. They did great though. No, right, no, yes, that's right. No, I agree. I think that speaks to the culture that we have at the school, and really, that's the kind of thing that I can't drive every bit of that. Like, but we have some of the absolute very best teachers, and like if you see some of the photos and videos at the prom, so our moderate class and our Synpig class are some of my favorite. They are terrific. So, no, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yeah, they work very hard. Yeah.
I just want to say from the parent perspective, thank you so much for all of the wonderful communication. I feel like there's so many places where communication can go so many different ways, and it's in a lot of places. So if I, as a parent, don't know what's going on, then that's 100% on me. But especially your emails when there is an incident. Sometimes.
Yeah, sorry, I usually don't say, hey, somebody did great on a test today.
No.
Not great. It's too much for me. You're like, here it goes, right?
That first email that goes out, I know all parents are like, there's not enough information in here. But it's also because even you don't have all the information,
Right.
But you you let us know, and then you follow it up, and everything is timely and well worded, and I'm like, I want you to template.
Thank you. First person that said that. Yeah. No, absolutely. And one of the things, I mean, I'm never trying to hide anything. I try to do things as quickly as possible. If we have any kind of incident, like we had a hard lockdown that ended up being called in, it was false. It was from a Google Voice number in Eastern Europe. And it happened to 16 other schools in Georgia that day and in Texas the next day and all the rest. And I got to hear the voice of the call that came in the Snellville Police Department. I mean, it was frightening. It was terrifying. So, like, I try to send communication out as quick as I can, but I also am trying to keep all the kids safe first, and then the cortisol and adrenaline is pumping, and I'm trying to write an email, and I'm shaking, and you know what I mean? So it is hard. Sometimes it comes out a few minutes later than I would like it, but yeah, we definitely do our best. And one of the things that I have to be careful of is it's very difficult if I say something, if I get it wrong on the initial, because then no one believes anything I say after that. They think I'm trying to hide stuff and lie, so, which I'm never trying to lie. It's more work if I do that. So if, sometimes the first one's a hair more vague just because I may not know it all, or I may just not be able to communicate at that time. But thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah.
First, I'd like to say we had 2 sons graduate from Brookwood in 1999, and it was a great springboard for their future.
Awesome.
But to your point about trying to ensure that all of your teachers are teaching to the same standards, not all schools are equal. When I grew up, I went to a lot of different schools, and it made a difference. And a lot of your students are going to transfer elsewhere where the school isn't the same.
Right.
I thought the concept of a core curriculum was a good concept. Whatever happened to it?
You talking about a national one?
Yeah.
I think there's just too much of the states' rights. Different states want to do different things, and there's different needs, depending on where we are. And so there is a state curriculum. And so the Gwinnett curriculum is the state curriculum. There are some areas where we modify it to actually make it more rigorous. We can't make it less rigorous, or we can't make it less information or whatever. So there is a state one. So if you move anywhere in the state of Georgia, you're going to be, your algebra curriculum is to the T here and in Valdosta and in Perry and everywhere else. The national one, there's just so much that regionally will vary on what is valued and what needs to be taught, what doesn't
But
need
it
to be
was
taught.
really
So.
it was just standards, wasn't it? And it wasn't the teacher's teaching plan.
No,
It
I
was
mean,
just
now,
standards.
you're right. Technically, if they close the door, they might say something that I have no idea they're saying in there that day, right? Because I'm not in 215 classes a day. But I just think that the appetite for a nationwide one just isn't there, or hasn't been there. So what we have right now is just Georgia. So, yeah. That's way above my sphere of influence. I don't know if I care about that being my sphere of influence. Yes.
I'm not in a Brookwood cluster, so this is a true question, but
Sure.
I'm just curious about the mental health of your students. How is that going, and do you have enough counseling staff?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's actually huge since, I mean, we've always had mental health concerns and things like that. I think COVID just exposed and exasperated. I mean, I think when our kids stayed home for a year, some of a year and a half, and just sat in front of their computer and their parents were trying to make do, many of them working and not there to supervise. And I think just the loneliness that came there and the isolation and, we had a big spike of not knowing how to be in social situations right afterwards. So it definitely has been something that it's absolutely real. Now, we have 9 counselors at Brookwood for almost 4,000 students, which is great. We're actually not even a lot of that many. I rearranged some funds to do that. But our counselors don't do therapeutic counseling. Our counselors, help kids navigate situations and things like you would think of a typical school counselor. They are also some of the ones that graduate that help get kids on graduation paths and make sure, you're missing this, and help them get themselves aligned, help them write things for college. And so they are there when there is a time when we need to talk to somebody, but it's really not therapeutic. And that's not what they're trained to do, and that's really not what they're intended to do. And there's quite a number of parents that don't want someone to necessarily do that with their child. So it is still a challenge. I think what I've found, just in my experience, is that if you show up to school and you just get your attendance taken 6-7 times a day, and then you go home, you are much more likely to be isolated and to be struggling than if you are a part of a club, an activity, a fine art, a sport, something like that. And so when we were at Cruise, and I believe they're still doing this, one of our biggest initiatives is we started something called Connected at Cruise. And our goal was to get 100% of kids in something, in a club, in a sport, in a whatever it was. And we tracked it. I think our first year we got 93% of kids in something. And we're the same thing. We've got over 100 clubs and activities at the high school. We've got the full athletic gamut. We've got all kinds of academic things like beta clubs and all those. And so our goal is to get every kid involved in those. And I think that makes a difference. That starts to move the needle a little bit. But what we're trying to do is be intentional about that. So how do we know? Because if we say, we got 16,000 different kids participating in different things, what about the 20 that are? So part of it is really identifying who's not connected and how do we do that for them. So, but yeah, it's going to be an ongoing challenge. It changes all the time, and but it's something we definitely do, and it's why that focus on relationships is always a part of it. Because one of our things I talked to our teachers on Thursday when they came back, our goal is kids take surveys, and one of our goals is that we have 100% of our kids say, I have at least one adult in this building that I can trust. Now, hopefully they got 5 or 6 or 7, but I hope they have at least one. And that's what we want them to make sure that they have somebody when something is hard that I know I can go talk to.